Sup guys, this is a bunch of useful tidbits about Chapter 16 that I've picked up over the past few days. I'll split things up by subtopics, and related videos will be linked in the description. First, I'll start off by listing the bugs that people have told me. Some of them are bugs, but I don't know if they're all bugs or there are things that the devs decided to retcon last second but forgot to remove some of the traces in the code. First is that the airbases apparently don't do anything if you have airspace superiority or airspace supremacy. I've had that for all of my clears so far because why would I even go into a plane hell stage with airspace parity or below? I believe they're supposed to send bomb planes in every fight until they're destroyed. But yeah, for now, you don't even have to bomb the airbases if you have enough airspace control value, since they don't do anything. Next, if both of your surface fleets have over 1700 aviation total, it takes one less fight to spawn the boss. I don't think it makes a huge difference unless you're underprepared for the stage, since your mob fleet isn't going to be running out of ammo anyway, but it's not that difficult to hit either, so it might be worth considering. Not sure if it's even a bug or they just forgot to explain this to us. Finally, some of Musashi's attacks aren't going off, potentially making the final boss fight easier than intended. Those are just the ones I've been made aware of so far, and if anything gets changed, I'll leave it in a pinned comment. And if the stage becomes a lot harder after the bugs are fixed, I'll probably redo the full clear. Routing is kind of important in this stage because the shortest path to the boss is fixed every time. I'll leave a link to the shortest path in the description, but I won't directly spoil you here. Even if you're not paying full attention, you'll probably figure it out on the second or third playthrough of each stage. If you're going for a full clear of the stage for the 3-star completion, regardless of whether you're doing it on lethal or after reducing the threat level, the order in which you engage each node will have a huge impact on your success. Battleship nodes are much more difficult out of ammo than other nodes, due to the battlecruisers and battleships that need to be taken out swiftly, otherwise they will bombard your main fleet with unavoidable damage. When you're out of ammo, they will be twice as difficult to kill, so I would highly recommend taking them out before your fleets run out of ammo. Obviously, the 3-star nodes are more difficult than the 2-star ones, but even 2-star battleship nodes tend to be more difficult than 3-star reconnaissance nodes from my experience. I would go as far as to say that it might be worth considering using submarines to assist you with battleship nodes even before you run out of ammo, and then raw dogging the recon fleets out of ammo. 16.4 can spawn between 2 to 8 3-star battleship nodes from what I've seen, and it always spawns 3 2-star battleship nodes at the starting area. I think the double mob fleet setup I posted can handle up to 6 or 7 3-star battleship nodes and still win, but I'm not super confident about 8. If you're full clearing and see more than 6 3-star battleship nodes, it might be a better use of time to just restart the stage. If you're playing on manual, you can save your airstrikes to cancel out the shelling from the enemies, making them much more manageable in general. Resetting is not necessary, but does save a lot of time. Here is a very obvious example. My fleet engages 2 2-star reconnaissance fleets back to back. Same fleet, same node, same out of ammo debuff, and no submarines summoned. After the first fight, the fleet loses some HP overall, but the opposite happens after the second fight, and the fleet actually comes out even more healthy. This implies that, depending on whether you're lucky or not, if you don't reset at all, you could full clear a stage in one run without any hiccups, and then, without changing anything on the next run, you could die after 3 fights. The double mob fleet setup I showcased has the potential to gain HP from each encounter, except for the battleship nodes out of ammo, so the HP loss is optional if you're willing to reset. You might think it's unethical to reset the node, but the alternative is to have your entire fleet die and then reset the entire stage instead of just one fight. Or maybe you can just get lucky, full clear the stage on the first try, and never look back. Cats make a huge difference. Luckily, there's a relatively large selection of good ones. Starting off with the Tempesta ones that everyone should have since they're free and their talents are fixed, every has the best combination of talents and skills, having an emergency heal skill. It's probably worth bringing her even if you have really stacked regular cats. Bonnet has a similar but slightly more restrictive heal skill, and her selection of talents are okay but nowhere as good as Every's. Drake and Teach also have very solid talents, but their skills are not as good as Every's. For the regular cats, skill-wise, Lime and Oscar are the best, but they're both command cats. Lime has 2 skills that increase battleship firepower. The second one requires you to fight an enemy that is right next to terrain, which is every single enemy in 16.4. Her third skill also increases your damage against the most threatening enemies mentioned earlier. Oscar excels for her second skill, which has a 15% chance to preemptively strike enemies, dealing almost 15% to all the enemies in the node for the fleets that I was using her in. This is much less reliable than Lime, but it could save an otherwise doomed run by activating multiple times due to luck. Justice has the same preemptive strike and could be worth considering as well. Despite Oscar and Lime having the best skills though, I would still rather bring like a Pound or Antenna if they have much better talents. Also worth mentioning is that talents that are typically considered to be very good might not be the best for this. For example, Soulful Warrior is obviously the best thing you could get on a battleship-focused cat, but it does very little in your fleets that probably contain at most one battleship. Carrier Officer and Ace Pilot are two of the best talents you can get on a carrier cat, but both of them don't affect light carriers for some reason, so don't put a cat with these as their best talents in your fleet with a battleship and 2 light carriers. Something that might not be conventionally desirable, but is much better than Soulful or Ace, is Force Serenity. It affects the entire fleet, and all the stats it gives are put to good use in the chapter. Forest, Mountain, and Flame are probably the ones you want to look out for, as well as potentially the USS Faction talent, which will probably affect more ships in your fleet than Soulful Warrior or Ace Pilot. Anti-air talents are okay as well, since they affect the entire Vanguard or main fleet, regardless of hull type, but I wouldn't suggest cat chasing for anti-air talents. I've been summoning submarines the same way pretty much every battle, which is having them attack right after the first round of main fleet attacks is done. Aside from the very beginning of the battle, during which you're fighting relatively low danger enemies, the moment between the first and second round of main fleet attacks is going to be the biggest downtime, and I use my submarines to fill that gap. I move my submarines liberally when full clearing, because I don't really care about saving oil for something I only have to do once. With regard to fleet building for a full clear, I highly recommend using the ammo in your boss fleet to help with 3-star battleship fleets, which means constructing a boss fleet that can do multiple battles. It doesn't have to be exactly the one I used, and I will be providing some more examples in a later video. For whichever fleet is in charge of anti-submarine, I've been using William D. Porter a lot, who deals the most damage to subs, but you don't have to necessarily use her. Experiment with other options, but don't expect that, like previous stages, bringing Hedgehog alone will be enough. It's not overkill to bring as much as Hedgehog plus 2 anti-submarine planes on light carriers, and then even another depth charge on top of that. You can bring less if you're using Eldritch, since she has a Ghost Hedgehog without equipping any anti-submarine auxiliary, but don't put anti-submarine auxiliaries on her, since she has relatively low anti-submarine stat, and her Ghost Hedgehog is there regardless of what you give her. It's better to bring her and have her help with anti-submarine warfare, but give your actual anti-submarine auxes to a ship like Porter, Z-52, or Trafalgar, who will do much more damage with them. I haven't really talked about 16.1 and 16.2 at all because they're very easy. If you manage to conquer Chapter 15, I believe these 2 chapters should be of no issue. It kind of felt like a complete waste of time because it doesn't even teach you any of the mechanics that appear in the later stages. The submarine support fleet introduced in 16.1 and 16.2 were replaced by the carrier support fleet in 16.3 and 16.4 as well. If you just bring your Chapter 15 fleets, you should be able to get by without much issue. I think the relative difficulty of beating the chapter is lower than beating Chapter 15 on release, because Chapter 15 had the super carrier nodes plus the multiple boss fights, and I believe you had to do 1 battle out of ammo on 15.3 as well, which you don't have to here. There were the bugs I mentioned before though, so it's possible that those will be fixed and then it'll become more difficult as a result. Full clearing is a different story though. When I was doing Chapter 15 on the day it came out, there was a bug where the debuff from the mini-boss fights were being applied to mob fights unintentionally, and stacking with the out-of-ammo debuff, so that felt super difficult, but I honestly found full clearing Chapter 16 to be on par or more difficult than 15, even with that bug. Even though I have much better ships, equipment, and fleet tech compared to when Chapter 15 first came out, the one thing we're kind of missing is levels relative to the enemies, which is arguably more important than anything else. The more I played the stage, the more I actually started to like it in some twisted way. It really felt like I was being pushed to the limit. When I was just playing on autopilot at the start, it felt like everything was just short by a little bit. There were planes leaking through my anti-air, submarines surviving with a sliver of HP, suicide ships sneaking by, and so on. I actually ended up going and crafting the new Ironblood Gearlap fighters, the prototype FW190, that only provide a marginal benefit to the carrier support fleet, which I hadn't bothered to till this point, as well as make a couple more of the Gearlap anti-submarine planes. There were also some things I forgot to do that would have probably made my life easier, like upgrading at least the second rudder to +13, or upgrading the anti-submarine planes, but the difference wouldn't be night and day. The best fleet I've found so far for full clearing ended up running all 5 of the best healers in the game across 2 fleets, which you probably won't be able to replace them with any other healers to the same effect. Since there's no ammo node, and the boss was quite easy, I was using my second fleet to clear out some of the nodes, and by the end, it felt like I had just about exactly enough ammo and submarine charges to clear out the entire stage somewhat comfortably. On top of that, the fact that the spawns are fixed in location, and only a portion of the node types even change, makes me feel that each placement was deliberate and has some sort of purpose, unlike the much more random node placements in past chapters. I'm sure cynics out there are going to complain and say how easy and boring it is, but I personally found it to be challenging enough and had a good time figuring things out on the fly, since the only campaign I've really been doing as of recent has been raising enough Lungwus to fill up an entire aquarium. Retrofit in a month, by the way. Anyway, that's pretty much it for this video. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.